COVID facility at Asia World Expo will reopen as caseload continues to climb. Future of Fanland Golf Course remains undecided. And President Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin are expected to attend G20 meeting in Indonesia. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. Hong Kong's daily COVID infection cases have reached another new peak since March, with 6,445 new cases reported today. 185 of them are imported. In view of the escalating situation, the treatment center for COVID-19 at Asia World Expo will reopen next week. Christy Khan reports.
Today was the second consecutive day that Hong Kong's daily COVID infections topped 6,000. 13 more residential care homes reported positive cases. Among them, the Greenwood in Tsing Yi reported a cluster outbreak, with more than a dozen carers and residents infected with the virus since Wednesday. More than 100 residents and carers who are listed as close contacts have to undergo quarantine. Health officials expressed concern about the outbreak in care homes.
Recently, we have seen many more outbreaks in the care homes. I think it is because of the increasing number of infections within the community. The care homes are staffed by citizens who reside in the community. If we have a higher infection rate in the community, then it means that we cannot afford to overlook mild symptoms. If you allow that to happen, you are just allowing the infection to spread.
Health authorities also warned that the number of infections will climb eventually, saying the Omicron BA.5 strain is becoming more dominant in the city.
Since the 15th of August up to now, we are having a daily increase of over 1,000. 400, 500 more a day. Probably this is all because of the greater infectivity of BA.5.
To cope with the increasing demand for hospital beds, the treatment center for COVID-19 at Asia World Expo will reopen next week. An additional 200 beds will be provided for treating COVID patients. Meanwhile, the city reported 8 more COVID-related deaths, with patients aged from 61 to 93. 4 of them had no vaccination records. Christy Khan, TVB News.
The Security Bureau gave an update today on the plight of the Hong Kongers detained in Southeast Asia in an employment scam. The government received 3 more requests for help from Hong Kongers, bringing the total number of detainees to 11 so far. Undersecretary for Security Michael Chuk said in a radio program that 1 Hong Kong resident is reportedly being held captive in Thailand, while the other 2 are in Cambodia. Their exact location, however, remains unknown. Chuk said all the 11 victims could contact their families, but their movement is restricted. He added that most of the cases said there wouldn't be much problem as long as they obeyed orders. The syndicate members would only beat them if they failed to perform well or refused to work. Chuk does not rule out the possibility that the scam syndicates have accomplices in Hong Kong. 2 of the 4 arrested Airport Authority senior managers responsible for building the 3rd runway have been officially charged with accepting and offering bribes. The pair appeared in the Eastern Magistracy today. That's after the city's anti-corruption watchdog, the ICAC, arrested 30 people over alleged bribes related to the airport's 3rd runway construction. Between October 2018 and June this year, principal manager of the Airport Authority, Ricky Lee, allegedly accepted bribes from Ng Kai-on, director of Carroll Engineering, totaling some $3.8 million without reasonable excuse. The case has been adjourned until January 6th next year. Each defendant was granted a $500,000 bail. The fate of the Fanland Golf Course is still up in the air. The Advisory Council on the Environment failed to reach a conclusion over building homes on part of the course, even after over 20 hours of discussions on an environment impact assessment report. Following a 6-hour discussion last Monday, the closed-door meeting continued this morning. Convener of the Executive Council, Regina Ip, said the council would have focused on technical issues.
After all, this is an advisory committee. The power to accept or reject the consultant's report really rests with the Director of Environmental Protection, who is the permanent secretary. I believe the government will deal with the environmental issues in accordance with established policy and procedures. Other considerations are really irrelevant at this stage of the handling of the golf lands.
Still, she said conservation and ecological factors would make it difficult to flatten the land there. The Fanland Golf Course, with an area of 172 hectares, became one of the short-term options for the previous administration to build homes. The suggestion at the time was to return some 32 hectares of land there for housing development. But according to an earlier environmental assessment, species such as the leopard cat and small Indian civet, as well as endangered trees, were identified in the area. The report noted that only a quarter of that area with lower ecological value was suitable to build homes on. Still, former member of the Task Force of Land Supply Wong Kwon thinks there would be little impact on sports development, adding helping residents at subdivided flats is important. By law, the council must complete the assessment on the report before the 28th of this month for the Environmental Protection Department to decide whether or not to approve the suggestions. Indonesian President Joko Widodo said President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin are planning to attend a Group of 20 summit in Bali this November. Widodo made the comments in an interview with Bloomberg. Should the visit go ahead, it would mark President Xi's first time outside of China since January 2020, when he visited Myanmar. With regards to Russia, Indonesia has faced pressure from Western countries to withdraw its invitation to Putin due to Moscow's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. Indonesian President Widodo has sought to position himself as a mediator between Kiev and the Kremlin. In recent months, he has traveled to meet both the Ukrainian and Russian presidents. Indonesia, which heads the G20 this year, has also invited Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky to attend the summit in Bali. President of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who took office on June 30th, has met with Chinese Ambassador Huang Xilian. In Huang's courtesy call, they exchanged views on further strengthening the relationship between China and the Philippines. Huang said China and the Philippines are willing to continue rapport with each other and start a new golden age for the bilateral relationship. Marcos, meanwhile, said his nation looks forward to closer ties with China and supports the One China principle, while insisting on the Philippines' independent diplomatic policy. He adds they pursue a Filipino way to solve disputes and maintain peace and stability in the region through dialogues. The sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said Pyongyang will never accept South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's so-called foolish offer of economic benefits in exchange for taking steps towards denuclearization. Yoon had proposed the assistance package in a televised speech on Monday. In a commentary published in today's edition of North Korea's official Rodong Sinmun newspaper, Kim Yo-jong said Pyongyang has no intention of halting its nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles program for greater economic cooperation. She questioned the sincerity of South Korea's calls to improve bilateral relations as Seoul continues to conduct combined military exercises with the United States. Still ahead on tonight's news, UN Secretary General fails to break deadlock during visit to Ukraine. Attacker of award-winning author Salman Rushdie pleads not guilty. And City's new innovation chief, Sun Dong, shares his vision on industry. Welcome back to TVB News. Despite a meeting involving the leaders of Ukraine, Turkey and United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, little progress has been reported in trying to find a peaceful solution to the war between Russia and Ukraine. Guterres, meanwhile, has urged both sides to ensure no war activity takes place near the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia. Nazbi Karim reports.
Three influential figures trying to end the war: Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, and United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. Just one name is missing, that of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Any agreements between the three in the view, as they try to ratchet down the war, needs Moscow's blessing. Erdogan said he would follow up with Putin, though none of the three leaders was able to give a clear indication that any breakthrough had been made. Erdogan, in his first visit to Ukraine since the start of the war, has put himself forward as a peacemaker, with his country heavily reliant on Russia for trade. He urged the international community to continue diplomatic efforts, saying he was confident peace would be forged at the negotiating table. All three, meanwhile, called for the area around the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant to become a demilitarized zone to avoid a potential catastrophe. Zelensky said Russia must immediately and without conditions withdraw its troops from the area of the plant, stop all provocation and stop all shelling. The Russians, though, say they have no weapons in the area and blame the shelling on Ukraine.
I remain gravely concerned about the unfolding situation in and around Europe's largest nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia. Common sense must prevail to avoid any actions that might endanger the physical integrity, safety or security of the nuclear plant, and the facility must not be used as part of any military operation. Instead, agreement is urgently needed to reestablish Zaporizhia as purely civilian infrastructure and to ensure the safety of the area.
On the battlefront, Russia says its forces have struck a base used by foreign mercenaries in Ukraine's second-largest city of Kharkiv. Russian Defense Ministry said they have also hit targets near Donetsk, as well as Ukrainian troops and military equipment in the Kherson and Nikolaev regions. Ukraine's armed forces say the Russians are now focusing on trying to take full control of Luhansk and Donetsk in the east. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
The man accused of stabbing novelist Salman Rushdie last week in New York pleaded not guilty to second-degree attempted murder and assault charges on Thursday. He was later held without bail. Daniel Rao tells us more.
24-year-old Hadi Matar appeared in a western New York courtroom after a grand jury indicted him on charges of one count of second-degree attempted murder, which carries a maximum sentence of 25 years in prison, and one count of second-degree assault. He later pleaded not guilty to the second-degree attempted murder and assault charges. Matar is accused of wounding novelist Salman Rushdie last Friday just before the Satanic Verses author was set to deliver a lecture on stage at an educational retreat near Lake Erie. Rushdie is currently being treated in a Pennsylvania hospital for severe wounds. His literary agent said the novelist had a damaged liver and severed nerves in an arm and could lose an eye. The incident came 33 years after Ayatollah Khomeini, then Iran's supreme leader, issued a fatwa calling on Muslims to assassinate Rushdie a few months after the Satanic Verses was published. Some Muslims saw passages in the book relating to the Prophet Muhammad as blasphemous. Matar has been in jail since his arrest. His next court appearance is set for September 22nd. In an interview published by the New York Post on Wednesday, Matar said he respected Khomeini. Still, he didn't comment on the former Iranian supreme leader's fatwa on Rushdie. A district attorney spoke about Matar's interview with the New York Post.
It's never in a defendant's interest to go public. Clearly that individual might have an agenda. I felt that, certainly that's not a statement that's being made to law enforcement, so it's something that I can use.
Dan Orell, TVB News.
A former CFO of former U.S. President Donald Trump's family business pleaded guilty to helping that company engineer a 15-year tax fraud. And there's been more developments over the search warrant of Trump's luxury estate in Florida. More from NBC News.
Tonight, a surprise decision in the battle over whether to release the affidavit behind the search warrant of Mar-a-Lago. A Florida judge telling the government to prepare a redacted version of the affidavit it used to justify the search, saying there are portions that can be unsealed, giving the government a week to make redactions to the document. Attorneys for media companies, including NBC News, argue the affidavit should be unsealed, saying not since the Nixon administration had the federal government wielded its power to seize records from a former president in such a public fashion.
It is not the government's job to tell the public what is meaningful in terms of the release of its own information.
But the DOJ forcefully disagreed, saying the investigation is still in its early stages, adding the government is very concerned about the safety of the witnesses in the case whose identities could be compromised if the affidavit is unsealed. NBC's Mark Caputo was there. What was it like to actually be inside the courtroom today?
You didn't know it was a former president. You would have thought it was a mob boss. Because what they're talking about is obstruction of justice. They're talking about how witnesses are threatened and how obstruction of justice could occur if more information is released.
Mr. Trump's lawyers did not make any arguments for or against unsealing the affidavit, but the former president has publicly called for the documents to be unsealed. And today, a Trump spokesperson tweeted, "No redactions should be necessary, and the whole affidavit should be released." As for the documents that were taken from Mar-a-Lago, two law enforcement officials tell NBC News more than a week after the search, agents are still sifting through the large haul of 27 boxes containing 11 sets of classified information. For his part today, Mr. Trump released a link to a memo he sent in 2021 where he purportedly declassified some material. But legal experts say that's irrelevant to the potential crimes prosecutors are investigating. Adding urgency, a source familiar with the matter tells NBC News inside Trump world there are discussions about whether to release surveillance video of the search. Eric Trump was asked earlier this week if the footage would be released.
Absolutely, Sean, at the right time.
Meanwhile, in New York today, Alan Weisselberg, the former chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, pleaded guilty to tax fraud charges, admitting he took $1.7 million in untaxed perks, including free rent, school tuition, and multiple Mercedes automobiles. Weisselberg agreed to pay nearly $2 million in taxes and fines and serve 5 months in jail. As a part of the plea deal, Weisselberg is expected to provide information about those business dealings, but not about his former boss.
Los Angeles police are asking for the public's help in identifying suspects who ransacked a 7-Eleven store. Police released footage of the Monday incident when dozens of people ran into a 7-Eleven store in the Harbor Gateway neighborhood south of downtown LA. They grabbed whatever they could from the shelves, and at least one person was seen throwing items at the store's clerk who was trying to hide. Police have announced a $50,000 reward for information leading to arrests. Back in Hong Kong, developing the city to become an international innovation and technology center is one of the priorities of the government. Driving this effort is Secretary for Innovation, Technology and Industry Sun Dong. In his first television interview since taking office, he spoke with TVB News about his vision for the future of Hong Kong's industrial development. Jackie Lin reports.
Deliver stem cells.
An academic
using this robot.
Turned politician to joining the Hong Kong government as the Secretary for Innovation, Technology and Industry. The new innovation chief shared his vision towards the future path of Hong Kong's industrial development.
Reindustrialization is not about bringing back the labor-intensive industry to Hong Kong, but focusing on introducing and developing high-end industries.
And that particular high-end industry should be strategically chosen.
Hong Kong has encountered a lot of difficulties in developing industry, so we cannot do everything. So one thing we need to consider is whether the selected industry can make Hong Kong fully utilize its strengths and make Hong Kong become an international leader based on the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, new material, and smart production lines.
Professor Sun asked the targeted industry should bring significant GDP growth and employment opportunities, especially for young people. But with a brain drain facing the SAR, will there be enough skilled labor to fill the jobs? Keeping talent, is it one of the weaknesses of Hong Kong compared with Shenzhen, Beijing, Singapore that we need to work on?
Every company said to us, we are facing the serious problem of manpower shortage. Compared to some mainland cities, we also have a relative high labor cost. Or even population problem, we need to consider how do we take immediate action to attract talent outside Hong Kong, or even to rob talents from all over of the world. That is a very urgent task for us.
Another disadvantage, the lack of a mature industrial ecosystem.
That includes the upstream basic research, midstream technology transfer, and downstream industrial development. That's why we need to do a better job.
The Beijing-born 55-year-old has resided in Hong Kong for more than 20 years and insisted on using Putonghua in his official speeches. Sun says that shows how Hong Kong is a trilingual city and all three languages should be deemed important. Now Sun has been practicing his Cantonese in meetings with his colleagues as well. Under the new administration, the Innovation and Technology Bureau has been renamed the Innovation, Technology and Industry Bureau. With that, Sun Dong said the Bureau will be reformulating work priorities and policy directions for Hong Kong's reindustrialization. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Professor Kenneth Cheung, and local expert in spinal surgery from the University of Hong Kong, has been appointed as the new chief executive of the University of Hong Kong Shenzhen Hospital. Cheung said the Shenzhen Hospital would have a more diversified development with plans to apply new medical technologies to various medical specialties. He also said the hospital is exploring the possibility of some surgeries for Hong Kong patients to place in the Hong Kong U Shenzhen Hospital instead of Hong Kong in order to shorten the wait time for specialist care. That's the news. Thanks for watching.